Well, hopefully we have everyone here. We'll start with Kari Thompson, fellow Rotarian and CEO of VEAP. She has worked for VEAP since April of 2019. She began as the Director of Advancement. As you can remember, that is the time when the COVID pandemic is hitting us. During her tenure at VEAP, she has grown the organization's revenue by over 360%. She has expanded the scope of collaborations and increased visibility in the South Hennepin community. She immediately mobilized new funding sources, increasing rental assistance grants from $150,000 annually to over $5 million. And in September of 2022, she became the CEO. She has also been doing the jobs at one point of 3 different individuals. It's now been reduced to 2, so she has been very busy. Hopefully we will see her more. Also, this 2024, coming up next year, will mark the 50th anniversary of VEAP. So excited to see what new ventures VEAP has in store, but I would like to invite her up to talk to us about VEAP and give us a tour after. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm having Becky come up.
Oh, somebody should take a picture. Do you guys, do you have a
Brian's coming.
Awesome.
Yes, we do.
I'm Becky Amble.
I'm calling you Becky. I'm gonna decline it. It's at White House. Get out of it. Yeah, you go with the screen behind you. Hey, perfect. Yeah. There you go.
Here we go. Thanks, Chris. That's all I show people.
It is with.
So, do you want me to say anything?
Are you gonna get in there, Laura? Wait, don't you?
Okay, so here is our large check in a small format.
Smile. I got you.
Okay, so we are presenting VEAP with $5,000.
Awesome. Thank you very much, everyone. You have that for now. Just put it over there. Thank you, everyone, for being here. I really appreciate it. We have been partners with Bloomington Rotary for a really, really long time. So we appreciate all of the volunteer work you've done, the help with our student hunger program, as well as the financial donations that really help us. So thank you very much. I wanted to show a little presentation and introduce you to some of my colleagues who are going to help me as well today. And bear with us, we were having a little bit of trouble with this earlier, so I hope it works. I'm just going to move to the next screen here quickly. Oopsie, yeah, there we go. Okay, you guys want to come up here? We could do some introductions. So again, my name is Kari Thompson. I think most of you know me, as I am also a Bloomington Rotarian, and I am the CEO of VEAP. And I wanted to introduce you to a few of our directors who are here today. First, we have Paul Jacobson. He's our Food and Basic Needs Director. So he runs the food pantry, the warehouse, and everything involved there. And he's going to be helping with the presentation and the tour today. Jessica Herring runs our Social Services Department as the director of that program. So anything that has to do with case management, long-term case management, housing stability, things like that. That's where Jessica's program comes in. And then Karen Hancock is brand new to VEAP. She just started, what has it been, 6 weeks, 2 months, as our new volunteer manager. So welcome her as well. So we're very excited to have her here. VEAP has, and she'll talk about this a little bit, but we have almost 2,500 volunteers. So her job is very important to us as well. So we're just going to kind of talk about a little bit some of our impact statistics today, the causes of poverty, and how you can help. And we'll probably show a video as well, if that's okay. Let's see. So, as many of you may know, VEAP is the Twin Cities' largest food pantry. We provide access to healthy foods, social services, and financial and supportive services to our community. We were founded in 1974. So as someone mentioned, our 50th anniversary is coming up in February of next year. So 50 years we've been in the community. We currently have 23 full-time staff and close to 2,000 volunteers, which is really the equivalent of almost an additional 40 full-time staff. So we couldn't do the work without our volunteers, for sure. So our mission is together we create pathways to stronger, more hopeful communities through access to healthy food, housing stability, and supportive services. And our vision is that we create a thriving community where all are free to pursue their dreams. So this is the demographics of the areas that we serve. Primarily, we're in South Hennepin County, so Bloomington, Richfield, Minneapolis, and Edina are the areas that we serve the most, with nearly 50% being from Bloomington. You can see the other stats up there. And we do serve some other communities as well. If people come to us and need help with food, we're not going to turn them away if they're from somewhere outside of our community, but we'll probably give them food and recommend someplace closer to them within their community. So that's why you see a little bit there of people outside of our community. So VEAP serves approximately 20,000 people per year, and that's an unduplicated number. So what that means is we typically serve in visits, we have, what did we have? Over 150,000 this past year, right, Paul? So we had over 150,000 visits. So generally people come 5 or 6 times for help from us. And so we'll see people more than one time throughout the year here. But generally we serve 20,000 people at VEAP. And you can see the breakdown of where they come from. Mostly Bloomington, again, that's our primary area that we serve. So this kind of breaks down a little bit for you the demographics, our racial and ethnic demographics of our community. One of the things I think is important to note is our community is changing, diverse. It's becoming much more diverse than it has been in past years. And one area to note where we saw a significant increase of people in the last several years is in our Latinx community there. So you'll see generally our Caucasian white community has been our highest number for many, many years, but that's changing as the demographics in our community changes as well. And we're also, just to make a note on that too, we're really investing a lot of time in working with that community, hiring people who speak Spanish, who are bilingual, as well as just reaching out to community leaders so that people feel really comfortable and safe coming to VEAP. So I'm going to let Jessica take it from here.
Hi. So this slide is just talking a little bit about what types of households, what types of families are coming to VEAP. So as you can see, about 27% are just single people, single adult households. 73% of our households are families, which is anywhere between 2 to 9 people in the household. 31% of those households have minor children in the home. 18% are single parents, and about 8.5% of them are seniors over the age of 65.
Right. My job is an easy one. We just we give out food, right? So so our goal is really to create access, create easy access to the food that we offer, make it fresh, make it healthy food, a range of foods that meet the needs of the households that we serve the best we can. And that includes all of the food types you see up above on the screen. Obviously, we're setting out to serve lower income households as well as those that are food insecure. We encourage up to twice per month for visits to the pantry and mobile pantry visits. If they do find us out in the community, they can come there as many times as they choose. So a few of the highlight stats from 2022, you can see we served somewhere just south of 5 million pounds of food last year. A good portion of that was fresh produce. So a lot of the food, you guys have done some work with bulk produce and packing and all those things that needs to happen to help us do that. So whether it's bagged potatoes, onions, apples, carrots, whatever it may be, whatever's available at the time, we spend a lot of volunteer hours, and that effort goes toward prepping that food and getting it ready, making sure it's of good quality. In the mobile pantry, you can see our visits were quite increased from 2021, up 56%. So we've gradually added back some mobile sites over the last couple of years, and we're probably at around 13 or 14 sites right now, and that changes as the season goes. So if school's closed, we drop one, and other things happen, other activities over the summer as well that increase that number. Home deliveries has increased probably the most of any other way we distribute food. It's been, we're distributing over 400 deliveries each month, which is about equal to or somewhat greater than what we used to do in a year pre-pandemic. So, and obviously from 2021 it increased quite a bit as well. And on-site pantry visits, whether it's in-store, indoor shopping through the traditional food pantry or through the drive-up that we still operate Thursdays and Fridays, that's increased quite a bit as well, up 28%. So a couple of trends to note in 2022. So the average household made 15 pantry visits, up from 9 the year before. Again, we historically haven't offered twice per month, so that's a new thing since 2020. And we've seen that number grow, obviously, in the last couple of years. So each household is encouraged to come more than what they used to come to meet their needs. About 2/3 of the households had very low incomes. You can see that's the case there on the slide. And also, as Kari pointed out, the Latinx community is a somewhat bigger portion of the folks that come here for services as well. 43% of the households are working households, so full-time, part-time, seasonal workers, folks that are working hard that just can't quite make ends meet and need food support to help their families.
So I'm going to talk a little bit about what we do in social services. So one of the core programs that we offer through the social services department is case management support. So for individuals or households who are just struggling a little bit with how to achieve what they're trying to accomplish, maybe they're looking for housing, looking to increase their income, maybe get back to work, maybe they're struggling with some health, needing to connect to some community supports. Our case managers are available to work with individuals to figure out what they need, how to accomplish it, where to go next, and just to kind of walk alongside them in that path. So typically our main sort of needs are going to be their food security, their housing, so are they at risk for eviction? Are they currently experiencing homelessness? Are they having some kind of financial crisis that's impacting their housing? But it could be a range of other things from health, mental health, child care needs, navigating systems, applying for benefits, Social Security, all of those things that are just hard to navigate on your own if you don't have additional supports. So again, they get one-on-one case management. It's voluntary. They can just call up and say, I'm looking for some help. Do you have anybody that can work with me? And they sometimes will meet weekly, sometimes they meet monthly, whatever that person's needs are. We also offer financial assistance grants. So if someone is coming upon a hard time paying their rent, maybe they're behind on their utility bill, we can screen them for eligibility for one of our financial assistance grants, and then we would pay that assistance directly to the landlord or directly to the utility company to help prevent a shut-off or prevent an eviction. So a few highlights from last year. We saw 991 unique households last year. So unique households meaning they may have come back more than once, or they may have received more than one service throughout the year, but we're only counting them one time in that number. We distributed about $3.7 million in grants for rent and utility assistance, and also a little bit of money was also used for transportation needs. So if someone needs a gas card to fill up their car, a bus card to get where they're going, we also are able to provide that. And we sometimes have some other miscellaneous items like gift cards if someone needs to buy some household needs or something like that. Our team processed 1,376 applications for those financial assistance grants, and we fielded about 2,200 phone calls during the year. So again, this is talking a little bit about what our case managers do. So our goal is to increase stability and self-sufficiency. So if we can walk alongside someone and help them access a resource they need or increase their income, the ultimate goal is that when they're done working with us, they will be in a better place, they will be more stable and more able to meet their own needs going forward. So in 2022, we worked with 39 households in case management, and 32 of those were new. So last year was sort of the year we were trying to ramp up this model of service because prior to that, the first couple of years of the pandemic, we were really heavily into just paying rent because we wanted to avoid a crisis of evictions. But we acknowledge that that's not the solution. We really need to help people get back on their own feet, get back into a place where they no longer need to ask us for help with those needs. So again, they might meet once a month, they might meet every other week, or once a week, depending on what that person is working on and how frequently they need to connect with their case manager. So we will look at, again, their housing, their finances. A lot of times we see people with fixed incomes, and finding affordable housing is challenging, so we might be looking at options for housing that are more affordable or sustainable for that person. Do they have a desire to get back into the workforce? Are they able to do that? Do they need other benefits to support themselves? All of the things I've kind of mentioned already. So what is driving suburban poverty? So these are just a few things that we can identify that are contributing to this crisis. So you can see there the average housing costs for a one bedroom, $1,346, and for a two bedroom, $1,707. So those rents just continue to go up. The labor market, so there's instability of the service industry, maybe not able to go back to jobs that they had prior to the pandemic, not receiving benefits at those jobs. Education is a factor, so if they have less education, that will be less opportunity for increasing their income. Children and seniors are just more likely to live in poverty. And racial inequities, we can acknowledge there's an ongoing legacy of past injustices that contribute to our current circumstances.
Okay, so I'm going to quick show a video here.
Everyone has a right to live a happy life, and food on the table is a great start. I've actually been a single mom for about 16 years. In 2008, I had a really challenging time because of the market, and I'd been out of the workforce for a little while, raising my daughter. And so I got into sales, actually, which is outside what my background is. I have a master's degree, actually, and I was really excited to, after the several years in sales, to get a job in my major again. But it was a contract role, so there's always tenuous things with that, because if you miss a paycheck of any kind, or if you're sick or anything, you don't get paid for that. And my daughter went into the hospital for a very serious surgery at age 13, and she almost died. And so I was in the hospital with her, but I missed 11 days of work, and I had no paycheck. So what I did was I called my family to see if they could help me with my finances for just that short period of time. And what happened was I got a comment back of, you have a master's degree, you can figure it out. And unfortunately, that hit me so hard, I'll never forget that quote as long as I live. And so I was scrambling.
I had worked all my life, so I was used to taking care of myself. I had children, and then my boyfriend got sick and passed away, and when he passed, it was all on me. And I had retired and gone back to work, and I enjoyed what I was doing because I worked in nursing. I was a HHA and CNN, and I loved it. But then I became sick, and then COVID hit, and there was the uncertainties. So sleepless nights, scared, heart pounding. I get a little anxious now thinking about that time. I was embarrassed to reach out for help when I felt I should take care of myself.
All I could think of is what a failure I was. I felt that a person in my situation should have it together. And how could I be in this situation where I actually needed help at this desperate of a need? And I was riveted with fear.
But I wasn't getting very far with those thoughts. I had to realize my fear wasn't going to go away until I did something.
I was so sick to my stomach at the thought of having to go to a food shelf, but I did. I took the step.
And then I just met other people that had said, call VEAP, call VEAP. And so eventually I did.
When I walked into VEAP, my worries and fears melted away slowly. And I said, I'm so embarrassed to be here. They were very understanding with me and said, everybody hits road bumps in their life. And that's what we're here for.
I have been in Minnesota all my life, and I've not known a community center like this.
My expectation of what a food shelf was and what it really was in reality was night and day.
It was big, and you just felt like you were in a grocery store.
I was so shocked to see, I got a shopping cart and pick out my own foods that I liked and my daughter liked. We got great protein and the plethora of fruits and vegetables.
I liked the way that they always smiled at you and asked you, do you need help with anything? Can I get you something?
It was beyond my expectations.
I filled out the form to get food, and as I was filling out the form and talking to the woman, I said, well, now I gotta get something to cover my lights. And she says, don't worry, we'll just take care of this. Just fill this out and we'll take care of it. And I thought that was so great that it was kind of emotional because I got food and light all of a sudden.
Lots of times with the programs and everything with the counties and things like that, they take time to receive the benefits. And so VEAP is there that day that you are hungry, the day that you don't have something to put on your child's plate. I know what my daughter would say if she was sitting here. She would say this herself, Mom, if I could have done it for you, I would have done it for you. But since I couldn't, I'm so glad they were there for you.
So I almost feel privileged to be a part of VEAP.
One thing I want to stress to people is that don't be afraid to go to VEAP no matter what your situation. Anyone can end up in this situation. It doesn't matter what degree you have, it doesn't matter what kind of family you came from. VEAP has been there for me when no one else would be there for me.
I see it as a life circle. We're all in this where we have needs and we never know where that need is going to be. I've given to VEAP. I've given food to VEAP. And it makes me feel good when I bring something because I'm in the circle. I had needs, they gave to me. Now I had a little more, I gave back. And I think if we continue that, we'll do better. But if we don't contribute to our community, the community struggles along with us. And I don't want VEAP to struggle. I want them available, for all of us.
So I think that video really speaks to a lot of our community. I mean, everybody can just be easily one paycheck away from having a financial crisis. I'm sure all of us know somebody who's in that situation, or maybe we've been there ourselves before. So I think the two women in the video, Nora and Alana, they really speak to the people that we serve at VEAP. We're here for people who are in an immediate crisis. The majority of the people that we serve, as we said, they work, they're working hard, they're trying to make ends meet, and just something comes up and they need some help. So some of the things we generally need help with is volunteers. On-site, off-site opportunities are available. We're always looking for drivers, we're looking for people in the warehouse to help out. So lots of different opportunities. So if you're interested in doing more than what Bloomington Rotary has done, contact Karen, she can help you with that. Holding a food and fun drive, which I know Bloomington Rotary has done for us in the past, is always helpful as well. And then just advocating, pushing for change, and donating. Just $30 feeds a person for one whole month. So we appreciate that, everything that we've accomplished here from Bloomington Rotary and everything that you've done for us to help us to meet those needs. So I'm going to let Karen take it over for talking about the volunteer program.
Thank you, Kari. I have the absolute best job here. I get to play with volunteers. We get to have a good time. We get to pop popcorn. If you can see on the wall, we just actually came off National Volunteer Week last week. So it was our opportunity to encourage our volunteers to come in and have us thank them in person for all the work that they do. So you'll see all these dinner plates on the walls. These are just the volunteers that were here this week. So they're in here and they're all down that hallway. So that shows you just how important our volunteers are. Volunteer is the first word in VEAP. We could not do what we do without the volunteers. There's just no physical way we could do the services that we do without the close to 2,000 volunteers that we work with. Basically, we make it as easy as possible for you to volunteer. So anybody's welcome. We allow children to come and volunteer. We have school groups that come in. We have corporations that come in as well. We don't require any experience. We'll train you right on the job. Flexible scheduling, we do our best to try to work with you on your schedule as long as it meets the needs of the pantry. We have a whole lot of different opportunities in addition to the pantry. So if you're a data entry guru, we can certainly use your help. If you like to meet and greet, we can use you in intake. There are all sorts of opportunities. And then we also have our various fundraisers and activities through the year. So individuals and groups, the easiest way to do that, just go to veap.org. We've got online applications right there. It gets you right in the system, and we'll call you within 24 hours and get you set up to come in and volunteer. So I think, Laura, you and I are working on a regular Rotary day or evening, and hopefully we'll see you all volunteering at VEAP.
All right, so that is our presentation about VEAP. We're just going to open it up for any questions for any of us.
There was an article in the Minneapolis paper a couple of weeks ago about people that are on Section 8 housing and they were being evicted for $150 or $200 or something. I mean, is that something that you work with some of those people in Bloomington on?
Yeah, so the question is an article I think you said in the Star Tribune a couple weeks ago about people who are on Section 8 vouchers, which is the housing voucher where the voucher will pay part of the rent and the tenant is responsible for 30% of their income. So hearing that people were being evicted from housing that was using Section 8 for as little as $150 or $200 past due. Yeah, so I haven't read it, so I know that we do hear a lot about landlords that don't love working with Section 8. So a lot of times if there's a reason to evict someone, they will use it. The housing market right now allows landlords to be a little bit more choosy about who they rent to. Some feel that it's not as easy to work with a tenant who's on Section 8. There might be a little bit of bias built into that, or they might just not want to jump into additional hoops of maybe needing their unit to be inspected or having some additional requirements there. So they just sometimes are seen as less desirable tenants. So I would believe that a landlord would evict someone over a small amount if they were maybe not interested in continuing to work with a voucher tenant. So I don't have any specific anecdotes about it, but it rings pretty true. There's a really low vacancy rate, and landlords usually have multiple people to choose from when they are renting a unit, and so they might just say, I'm not going to work with anyone who uses Section 8.
So if somebody came to be in that situation, would you help them?
We could try to, yeah. There's some eligibility screening we do. They have to meet income limits. But if they were being evicted and we could prevent that eviction by paying what they owed, we could do that. sometimes the landlords have already decided to end someone's lease. So if if us helping them isn't going to prevent them from losing their housing, we don't always do that, because if the landlord's going to evict them anyway, then it's not a good use of our funds to pay the landlord to just go ahead and evict the person. But if it's going to prevent the eviction, then we certainly would try to do that. And we do a lot of landlord tenant mediation or advocacy. So if we can work with that landlord, let them know that that tenant has our support, maybe they're going to be working with a case manager, maybe that would make the landlord more willing to continue to work with them. Sometimes it's a legal issue. Do we feel like the landlord is maybe not following the law exactly? We might try to connect that tenant to a legal resource to make sure that their rights are not being violated. So there's a few things we can do there.
I have a question. I actually have a couple. I was going to ask one, but this one kind of follows up what you said about renting. It seems to be that more and more landlords are turning toward these management companies that then try to impress the landlord. It's not the family that gets the rent free by managing the place anymore. It's these management companies, and they try to do everything they can. Charge $75 a nail hole or things of that sort. To keep all the security deposit, maybe send them a bill on top and tell them they'll be lucky if we don't sue you for that. So are you finding that that's the case, or am I just seeing is my anecdotal evidence kind of generalizable that this is happening more often than just the little bit I'm seeing in terms of management companies basically cheating people out of their security deposits?
Sure, yeah. So are the management companies looking for ways to, keep parts of deposits or to penalize tenants? I only have anecdotal information about this as well, but I know during the pandemic, when there was an eviction moratorium, there were very few ways that a landlord could legally get somebody out of their unit. And so for a while, there weren't really any at all unless they were being violent or something like that. But then eventually some of those protections went away, and they could stop renewing leases, or they could evict for other reasons that were not past due rent, but maybe there was damages or something like that. So we did see landlords who were kind of using any reason they could to be allowed to file an eviction. So I think that was really something we saw more of as the kind of year 2 of the pandemic and that moratorium phase out was happening, is that there were some landlords who were really anxious to get certain individuals out, and so they were going to jump on anything that they felt that they could. But yeah, we see management companies tend to be a little more strict with some of the rules that they enforce. So they might have a corporate policy, this is how we do it, no exceptions. And so it's harder to advocate for someone in that situation, because they'll be less likely to want to take into consideration what's going on in that person's household. If you've got maybe an owner landlord who's managing their own property, or maybe they just have 1 or 2 properties, sometimes they can be a little more compassionate because they will listen to an individual story, or maybe they personally know the tenant because they've been living there for a while, and so we might be able to advocate a little more effectively in those situations. So yeah.
I'd be curious about your food sources and all your supplies. Is it like if it's donating, is that becoming a problem area? Maybe getting more and more companies to donate, or not, or how? Maybe you can talk a little bit about all the food and staple sources.
Yeah, so you asked about food sources and how that's changed. What's more challenging today than maybe it had been in the past? Donations are critically important to VEAP. Certainly our ability to distribute food is based on that. We get about 80 to 85% of our food from food banks. So, and much of that is donated from corporations and other, right? So that kind of funnels through the food banks to places like VEAP. And we also get a big portion of, I think it's somewhere between 10 and 15%, had been for like 3 or 4 years closer to 15%, more the USDA kind of commodity foods. So that's dropped back down to a much lower amount. So the volume of food from the government, which is completely free, is back down to kind of where it has been historically. So we're more and more relying on just community donations, which historically has maybe been 10 to 15% also of our supply. So we also, if we rely entirely on places like the USDA foods, we lack variety, right? We don't have all the things that people really want. It's more the really standard things that you're probably familiar with and have seen when you volunteered here, where it's not quite as culturally appropriate. There's just not as many types of foods. So the donations and the food drives are super valuable for us because it creates that variety. So to answer your question, I hope that helps a little bit, but it's shifted somewhat again, where the government supply has gone down. All the reasons that had gone up have disappeared. So trade mitigation things where we couldn't sell our food overseas, the government purchased and then redonated back to the hunger relief industry. And as the needs go up, obviously the amount of food we distribute goes up as well.
Well, that's my demographic question, and I saw 11 or 12,000 unique individual visits in Bloomington, around Bloomington people, if I got that right? Mm-hmm. And so if there's about 85,000 people in town, men, women, children in the census, that means 1 out of 7 or 8 at some point during the year at least needs to use the services of VEAP. Is that 1 out of 7 or 8 typical of first and second rate suburbs? Are we worse than the average, better, or about the same? Do you have any idea?
I know sorry, thank you. The question is, how does the city of Bloomington compare in terms of need comparatively to other cities in Minnesota, or at least in the metro area? The city of Bloomington has a significant need issue right now, and we saw that really expand quite a bit throughout the pandemic as well. So the city of Bloomington was one of the cities that received the majority of the funding, or a high percentage of the funding from the federal government through things like the CARES Act and ARPA funding to help our community. So there are people who are living in our community of Bloomington who are very low income and who are struggling.
Well, I'll go then. So I noticed that in one of your slides earlier on, it had 55 folks that were homeless. How does that play a role in that 49% of the services in Bloomington? Is that included or excluded?
That is probably not included. The way we gather the data is if someone says, I don't have a permanent address, we might just mark them in as currently not having a permanent address and experiencing homelessness, and then we wouldn't have any address data on them, so they would not be included in that breakout of Bloomington. If somebody maybe did say, I am not really stably housed, this isn't my permanent address, but this is where I'm staying right now, then we might put their address in because we might need it for if they're asking for a food delivery or some other reason. So there's a chance that they could be included in both categories, but I would say most people are not. If they're listed as experiencing homelessness, then we would not have any address information about them.
Do you guys still have that program where you're working with is it the South Hennepin
Collaborative?
Mm-hmm. And how is that working with VEAP? Maybe some stuff maybe changed with the pandemic and all
So the HSSC or there's Hennepin, I'm blanking, South Suburban Collaborative. So we do work with them. So tell me what you wanted to know about them again. Sorry.
Because the last time I heard of it, they were just bringing the program here to Bloomington, and they were going to put it together. So I don't know, whatever happened with that. So
SHHC, which is the other one. The suburban housing. So what I will say, My confusion is because over the course of the pandemic, most of those groups really weren't very active because people weren't meeting and people weren't going out knocking on doors. We are pretty active in some of those community groups now, and we were before the pandemic, so it's starting to come back. Particularly, some of the cities have their own little subcommittee that will look at who's getting evicted, can we go knock on doors, can we give them information about resources. So Bloomington does not necessarily have a subcommittee of the SHHC group. I think there was one that prior to the pandemic, VEAP was maybe even facilitating or was really involved in leading. It has not been active since I've been at VEAP, so I don't have as much history on that. But I know that, okay, good. Yeah, because we have a big interest in participating in those groups so that if there's a group working specifically within Bloomington to connect with households that are at risk, yeah, we want to be involved in that, so.
You indicated that there was, what, $3.8 million in rental assistance or something like that. Now, are those numbers dropping off now after COVID?
Yeah, so 2021 was actually our big year. It was like 5.3 million, I think. So then 22 was down a little bit, more of that 3.7, 3.8 million. So I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about funding too, but some of those sources of funding that came about during the pandemic are winding down.
Yeah, I can speak to the funding sources on that. So all of the funding that we received for rental assistance to help with that, so it's been approximately $12 million we've given out since the start of the pandemic, was federal funds that were specifically related to the pandemic. So things that both the Trump administration and the Biden administration had approved and sent down to the states that then distributed it out to the counties and to the cities and et cetera. So that was never intended to be long-term funding. It was intended to help people in the crisis in the moment. So we received quite a lot of funding, like we said, $3 to $5 million per year, essentially, to be able to help people to avoid eviction. We're now looking at going back to pre-pandemic levels of that. So we're still going to be helping people with rental assistance and with utilities, but it's not going to be close to the numbers that it has been in the past. Does that?
So what do you anticipate the numbers will be that you'll have?
What do we have in our budget for this year? Do you remember off the top of your head? Yeah, I think this year we put about $1.5 million in rental assistance and utility assistance to help. Pre-pandemic in 2019, we gave about $150,000 away. So we do anticipate, we did have some funding sources that were still kind of trickling down for this year. We do anticipate that number going down again, likely next year as well. Any other questions? Great. Yep.
Your lack of assistance, housing funding, create more pressure then on the Minneapolis-St. Paul to provide more funding out of their budgets, or?
No, everybody statewide has the same issue. So the funding that came down was for everybody in the state was temporary. So it was just throughout the pandemic. So everybody will be going back to pre-pandemic levels, which is why we're really ramping up case management and thinking about how we can help people, longer term solution, because we are still seeing people out there coming to us who need help paying their rent. So that's a bigger picture. We're no longer seeing it being necessarily always tied to the pandemic. In order to receive that funding, people had to have some kind of pandemic-related reason why they couldn't pay their rent. They were laid off because of the pandemic, they got sick because of COVID, things like that. We're finding that a little bit more difficult to tie that back to the pandemic, as everybody else is in the state as well, actually throughout the country. So everybody's kind of in the same boat. It's going to drop down a little bit, and so people are going to need to think about how we help people longer term.
I didn't happen to notice, I'm wondering if you keep track of the percentage that are from the veteran population, military vets.
Yep, we do. I don't know if I have those numbers right here, but we do keep track of that. We can get those to you if you're interested.
I always think of the big three of people going into bankruptcy or having distress as being divorce, job loss, or extraordinary medical costs. But there's some other things, like is long COVID a factor, or some other things that kind of crept in, or is there a big four and I'm just missing one? Or
Yeah, I can let you answer that because you.
Yeah, I think long-term disability definitely is one, whether it is related to the pandemic or whether there's just always been a long-term disability. So mental health, physical conditions, things that prevent people from working to earn a wage that would support their housing needs. We see a lot of people that are on a fixed income that can't find a market rate rental. So people who are receiving SSI or another benefit that is always the same every month, most of those folks wouldn't be able to go out and rent a one-bedroom apartment in our communities. So we're problem solving. Can we find other housing solutions? Do they live with other people? Can we find subsidized housing programs? The problem with those is there's usually a very long waiting list. So when someone comes to us in a crisis, we can help them apply for some of those housing options, but they'll maybe need to wait months or years before they are on the top of those waiting lists. But that's one of our strategies is can we find an affordable long-term solution. So yeah, I would say disability, long-term disability, especially mental health. There's just a lot of untreated mental illness that is preventing people from either working or being successful in a rental situation because maybe they're not getting along well with others or not abiding by leases. So we see that happen quite a bit as well. But I think there's just an epidemic of people that their income just is not enough to afford a rental. And that's sort of a constant state of being. So there isn't one crisis you can point to. It's more of just a long-term scenario that they're living in.
I have one other, I'm sorry, please.
Thank you for sharing all the services you provide. What is VEAP's greatest need right now?
I think right now our greatest need is we're trying to support the food pantry with food. So as we mentioned, we're seeing some of our donations are down a little bit, and it's been tougher to get some of those culturally specific foods and more specific things to provide variety for the food pantry. So I think, you know, we always have a list of what our most needed items are on our website at veap.org. So I would say if people are interested in helping us out to take a look at that, and we update that once a week, I think, so, or as needed.
It's actually helpful. I'm sorry, I don't want to dominate the question, but talking to you people on the front lines is kind of helps me with a variety of issues. And one that we've obviously been seeing at the legislature is the increase in the minimum wage, which obviously will help the fully employed but underpaid in terms of their needs group. But do you see it's also creating an issue, because that's raised on the other side, of people who are like, you know, handicapped in terms of their ability to, may not be a politically correct word anymore, but people developmentally disabled or partially disabled, but they've been able to take jobs that are tied in with their level of ability levels, but need a subsidy from an organization. Now the subsidy would have to go up, and because they can't do it, then they become unemployed. I mean, how does that shake down in your view from what you've seen?
I'm not sure if we have enough data to be able to answer that question entirely. So I do want to be able to offer everybody the chance to take a tour. So we're at 1:20 right now. So I think if those of you who are interested in staying afterwards want to take a tour, we'll, depending on how many people, we'll either do one or two groups of people to kind of go through the food pantry. So just stay here and let us know, and Paul and I will take you. Thank you, everybody.